please be gentle and kind. I don't know what he means by that. Just because I'm Welsh and I can talk for Wales. Are we live, dear?
Hang on a minute. God, blimey, you just give me a sec.
So Sue is Ninja Sue. You've met at
I
Festival, I
met
think, didn't
Sue,
you?
yeah.
Yes, and
Me.
Gemma.
And
But
Gemma,
Sue
yeah.
is the techno queen for us as well. She does all this for us. Because I've made a dash in from football with the youngest myself tonight. So yeah, it's all busy. So I kind of get it, with life with
Now,
the
Dan, I
kiddies.
would share this into your group, but I'm not in your group.
Well, you know how to get to someone, don't you? Bloomin' heck, how hurtful is that?
Hey, that's really bad.
I didn't think of that
I'm in
because
your podcast group. I'm in your podcast one. And
You can share it in there if you want to.
Why
I don't.
Hang on a minute. Which group would you like me to share it into?
Far and wide, as far as you'd like. Hey, Kathy.
Hi, Kathy.
As far
Hi,
as
Kathy.
you'd like to, really. So if you want to put it into both groups, there's two. I've got Deliciously Guilt Free group, and I've got a UK Low Carb podcast one.
All right.
See what she can do.
Let's share it into our group first.
Didn't even think about that. Hi, Deb.
Hi, Deb,
Deb.
and hello again, Kathy. Thanks for that. I was going to say thanks for the kisses, but that's a bit of a weird thing to say, isn't it? Thanks for the kisses.
Oh, do you know what, Don? I don't think we can have anything to worry about tonight. I'm sure, we'll make you very comfortable.
What do you keep mentioning? I should be worried or not worried? That I don't know. I'm now wondering what you mean by that. But yeah.
Well, the thing is, right, I've promised that I wouldn't talk about stud muffin. The members know what I'm like, see, and yes, I can be a...
So by not mentioning it, you mentioned it. I see what you did there.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I'm a little bit, shall we say, unfiltered at times, as the members come to know. I'll be gentle, though, I promise. So, welcome to our couch time. And for anybody out there don't know, we are joined by a very special guest tonight, and this is Dan Greef. And if you don't know him, you really need to go and Google this lovely gentleman. I've been honoured to meet him in person, as is most of the KFC team, I believe. I think you've met us all now, Dan, haven't you?
Yeah, I think I've met you all at Festival. Yeah.
So we're very privileged that you've come on to our couch time, and it's really just an informal chat just to get to know our members. We give advice, we share stories and all that. And I just think you are a very inspirational guy. I'm saying it all before the others can get in, okay? All right.
Embarrassing this.
Dan, just interrupt. When you want to say something, just interrupt her because you won't get a word in.
I'm here for the ride. My head's going to get so big I won't be able to get out of my living room. So,
But yeah, we know you. So for our members out there, you have a lovely company called Deliciously Guilt Free, where I believe is lovely sugar-free goodies that we can enjoy. And you also run a award-winning podcast, don't you?
That's where I've shared it. I've shared it
Yes.
in your podcast.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I love your podcast. Sorry, Dan, you're not going to word in you, bless you, So, did you want to ask something? I can see your hand up there.
No, that's how you get her to shut up.
So Josephine says, hi, Dan, I'm the old bugger who asked for a hug at Festival.
I remember you, Josephine. You bought me some water because you said I must be really thirsty and you looked after me. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
That's right.
It was really sweet. So what would you like to know then? Anything in particular? Because I'm happy to chat about anything. I want to get started.
How did you get into low carb? How did you, which came first, your podcast or your cookies and brownies? Yeah, Kathy, we love his cakes and his cookies.
What happened is, my wife Besma, who's not here at the moment, so I had to do bedtime by myself, and that's why I'm a bit stressed. Like, kids, get to bed. So she had gestational diabetes in 2014, 15 sort of time when she was pregnant with our daughter Hannah. And she's a doctor, and she was really worried that this was going to be, potentially type 2 diabetes one day. And as she's a doctor, she was kind of worried that she'd be told the kind of standard advice of insulin to manage the condition. And, as she looked into it, she just said, because I wouldn't have a clue, to be honest, about this stuff, because I'm not from a medical background. I just, I wouldn't have a clue about any type of diabetes. But she said, so why are they telling me to eat jacket potatoes without the fat on it and toast with less butter on it, when actually it was pretty obvious to her that it was the carbohydrates that were spiking her blood sugars. And so she looked into it online, and she found the talk by Sarah Hallberg. And if you haven't seen that, I'm sure many of you have, but I recommend it. It's an amazing talk. And yeah, really sad because she died about a year ago, didn't she, Sarah Hallberg, which is very sad. And so basically she found this video, she played it to me, and I thought that makes a lot of sense. And then, we just saw the results. She was slimmer and healthier at the end of that pregnancy than she had been going into it. The blood sugars were managed really well throughout the whole pregnancy without insulin. It's only at the end she then had to use it, because you quite often have to towards the end of pregnancy as hormones change. And we just got into low carb, and I realized very quickly a lot about myself. So I realized that I'm somebody with big insulin resistance, and I just have to look at a Domino's like door frame, and I put on weight around my arse. Around my bottom. That just happens like that. And I think there's I've learned that, and I've also learned that I think I have a food addiction. I think I know I do. And I think if anything we can have the conversation tonight, which might be of interest to you, I think food addiction is a big part of what a lot of us face. And I think I would have said to you a few years ago, don't be ridiculous. You can be addicted to drugs or gambling or something, but you're not going to be addicted to food or addicted to carbs, in my case, bread and stuff. But I think that people genuinely are, and I think that is a problem. So yeah, that's how it all started. And then as time went on, basically I decided I wanted to learn more about business and how business works. So I've got a real interest in politics. And so I just decided that I didn't have much experience in business. So I thought, well, low carb is the thing that I believe is going to change the world. So that's a natural thing to start a business in. And because I was baking cakes and stuff that people seem to like, I thought, well, let's try and see if anyone wants to buy the stuff. And so we were on Instagram and posting about it, and lo and behold, people did buy it. And that was all from my kitchen table, which is actually where I am now. I mean, it wasn't in this house, I just moved, but this is the kitchen table, literally where DGF was based for 2 years. And I was teaching at the time. Firstly, I was doing like a job in a secondary school and baking at night time. And then Besma got pregnant again. So then she would be like taking the orders out during the day with Noah, my son, in the pushchair. And I'll be teaching all day in a special needs school. And then I come home, bake all night, do the night feeds with him. And then the next morning she'd take out the post again. And then the pandemic hit and everything changed. So from being this tiny business with, very few orders, suddenly we had, loads of orders coming in, and we couldn't maintain it. So we went to a closed cafe in the pandemic and said, look, you've got a kitchen space. Can we hire your cafe? And then from there, after that, they then said the cafes are opening again in June. And so they said we went to a soft play. So like literally I'd have all the tables out and have all the orders out there and use their kitchen, have meetings in the ball pool. It was great fun. And then in September 2020, we then moved to a industrial, not industrial, like a catering unit in industrial estates. And then I started a podcast around the same time. So hi, Besma. So she just came home. So
she's
basically,
welcome to come and wave hi to the viewers, or does she stay behind?
Live to the Keto Fitness crew. Here she is. I've just been telling her story.
Hello.
Good evening, lovely. How are you?
Sorry, I've just come in a bit frazzled, so
that's okay. We've all had a day.
The kids are in bed. You can have your cuppa. All right.
Take care, lovely. You enjoy half hour peace and quiet. You know how precious those moments are.
So that's it really in a nutshell. And about the podcast, on that point, so I decided that, I'm dyslexic and I don't enjoy writing, although if you're on my email list, I write every day an email, so I do apologize. But
we know we get quite a few emails off
get quite a few. But I'm certainly somebody who loves asking questions, and I realized that in keto and low carb, there are a lot of things that I don't understand, and I'm not going to pretend to understand. Like I saw Dave Feldman yesterday, and oh my God, he's so clever. And I was like, I haven't got a clue. So I just said, I thought, I am my listener. So if I literally just say, can you stop there and tell me, what do you mean? Can you break that down? Can you explain that point? Actually, I kind of realized there was a definite need for that. And I think people, they want to understand these things in normal layperson speak, because that's what we are. We're not scientists, a lot of us, we're not medics. And secondly, I thought it'd be really good to just share stories, because you can learn a lot about the science of low carb and ketosis and all that stuff. but actually it's more inspiring, I think, to hear about somebody who, you know, has changed their life, and I actually find it inspiring somebody who's changed their life and then, you know, had a bit of a stumble and picked themselves up and a stumble. I think that's real. And I think it's important to say, you know, we're not this kind of linear, we start at this point, we get to this point and it's perfect. Actually, life has got ups and downs. And that's where the empathy can really help, because by sharing stories, we can, you know, build a community and be compassionate and empathetic to one another. And that's what the podcast is there for, really, to help share those stories.
And it's fab. I love listening to your podcast, and I recommend it quite often to
Thank you,
members
Casey.
and certain people who guests that you have on. Now, obviously, I'm going to say my favorite podcast is The Boss. Okay, Mark, his podcast with you. But genuinely, do you have a favorite guest, or do you like them all?
That's a really horrible question, Trace.
I know.
You can't answer that.
Obviously, the Mark episode is the best. I've got to say that now, because you might suddenly cut us off. If
No,
not.
but isn't it, you know, because you've done so many and you've had some really, really interesting, inspiring stories on there as well. Like, you know, how do you reach out to people? Where do you find your guests then, shall we say?
Yeah. So, well, I'll answer your first question too, because I'm not going to dodge it. But I think instead of a favorite episode, I'd say what I love is when you meet somebody who, in real life, i.e., you know, like online, I've not met a lot of these people in person, but I have on the internet. When after the recording finishes or before it, they're just down to earth, normal people. I love that. So Tom Watson, for instance, is a great example of somebody who's like that. You know, he was deputy leader of the Labour Party, had quite a high profile in British politics. Is just a genuinely lovely person who you just chat to and you think, whoa, you know, okay, it's a bit weird to say to somebody, do you want to be mates? You know, I understand that's weird. You
see a different side to people, don't you?
Yeah, but they're
genuine side.
Like Gary Torbs is like that, and David Unwin, I think, you know, from Kestival, you probably experienced that as well. He's a really genuine.
Well, David Unwin, I'll be honest with you, they changed my husband's life, because he's type 1 diabetic. And he didn't think he could do the keto lifestyle at all, and he's got a very successful journey now into keto. And
what, stud muffin,
yes, you know. I wasn't going to go there. I was going to be very good, but you know, he supported me because of my health doing keto and low carb, but he thought, as type 1, living the carb life and his doctors and the advice and all that, he thought he couldn't do keto. And then he met the Unwins in Kestival, not this year, the year before, and they put him in touch with Dr. Ian Lake, and he hasn't looked back now, and he's part of PHC as well, you know, and keto has changed our life, definitely, like, you know, so
you know, they very much have an approach which is very down to earth, very realistic, I think, and I think it's important that, you know, David Unwin talks about the medical side of things, and, you know, what cutting your carbs looks like, what you need to eat, and then Jen Unwin comes at it from the psychological, and I think that's really important, because, you know, to make real change in your life, how do you do it? And I think a lot of us probably beat ourselves up, you know, or we feel like we have to deny ourselves. And I think she talks much more about hope comes from positive change and where you're trying to get to. And, you know, and let's be honest, I think sometimes that's actually really hard. You know, in terms of like how to do keto and low carb, it's not actually that difficult. You can make it as hard as you like, but most of the time it's just cutting your carbs down to a certain amount and you get used to what the food is. But that's not the challenge for us. Most of us have the challenge of, why is it that we find ourselves eating the thing we don't want to eat? Or why is it we have regrets? Why is it we're tempted by certain foods, not others? You know, like steak, for instance. I'm not had a steak for about 2-3 weeks. And when I have one, it'll be my favorite food, but I don't crave one. But on the other hand, I do crave bread and, you know, toasted bread and stuff. So what is that about? And how can I change my environment and change my life to make it so that I don't eat that food? And I think that's where Jen's work is so important, and it is really helpful.
I believe Sue is going on one of her sugar addiction retreats coming up, aren't
you? Are
you?
Oh, is that the Lake District in November? Is that the one?
Yes, it is. 19th. I cannot wait.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, and actually, like I said about there's no final destination, I think that's the thing, isn't it? Those things are there to help, and you'll have the answers, and sometimes you'll be in a darker place and other times you'll be in a good place. And overall in life, you just want to try to keep working at it and believing in yourself and invest time into this because you know ultimately it's the right answer for you. So have a great time. I know David Ullman mentioned it and I was interested in going, but I just think with the family and everything else, it's a bit busy right now. And
No, you see, I paid for it through birthday money, and usually you just squander money on yourself, and I thought, no, do you know what? I'm actually going to do something for me. And
it's an investment in yourself.
It is, and I know
you're
I have
worthy, and you know.
Yeah.
Well, actually, on that point, I know Josephine just mentioned here about me staying up till early hours of the morning. And it relates to what you said there, I think, Sue, because I think that, it's interesting being a parent. I think about how I look after my kids and, like I put them to bed at, reasonable time and I feed them well and I look after them. I make sure they go out for good days. And it's really interesting how I think you can live a life for others and not sometimes think about yourself and how you should care for yourself. And we I think you were almost doing it then. You almost apologetically say sometimes,
I know,
I'm doing this myself,
because I would just squander it on the stuff for the house or whatever. And I actually thought, you know what? No, I'm going to do something for myself because I do have an addiction because I gave the alcohol up and that was an addiction. I might not have been an alcoholic, but it was an addictive. And there are patterns. And it's trying to work out how you can stop.
Yeah, and look after yourself. Just like almost step outside of you and think, what's the best thing for this person? I think I find that, that it sounds weird in a way, but I feel like that distancing yourself might actually help because it does for me. Thinking, hang on, what's the best for this man here? He needs to go to sleep. And, I'm terrible at that. I went to bed at 1 o'clock this morning because I just work hard and there's not enough hours in the day, but actually I need to think, no, what do I need to do to live a long, healthy life? And not just a long life, but, have like a long health span, not just lifespan. How I want to be in my 90s as healthy as I can be 90-year-old, not somebody who's in trouble and who's really like suffering and struggling. And so, I think treating ourselves and looking after ourselves is essential and almost parenting. I sound American, almost parenting ourselves.
I feel you're ahead of the game as well, Dan, because your children are young, so that you can pass on this information now as they're young and bring them up to have a different approach to the carbs and the foods and things, Jem, you got a question about?
Yeah, so I was quite interested, Dan, in what you were saying about your job as a teacher with, did you say in a special needs school?
Yeah.
So when so I do something similar, but for college students. And one of the things that I sort of learned about when I was finding out about keto and low carb is that it is some good for some special need for some needs, basically. Did you ever look into that side of it with that work, or is it just?
So my specialism was actually history and politics, like secondary school teaching. But when DGF started, I then left my full-time teaching job and I was doing supply. And then the supply teaching became a lot of special needs schools. And that's how, so I wasn't like a special needs specialist, but some of the children in my classes had epilepsy. And so they did then have, there you go, ADHD as well, Helen says. So it was actually really useful for the children with epilepsy, and they used to have it. But what was interesting was there's one boy I remember, he had like a bit like a shake that was made up for him because he had problems swallowing as well. And so he'd have this sort of straw given to him and he'd suck that liquid throughout the day to drink it. And I remember talking to one of the other teachers about this, and I said, I do keto as well. And he was like, why would you do keto? Like I was insane, because he saw it very much as a medicine, not as a diet. And I think what's interesting is, if it's weird that we can say it works for certain people's conditions, but they still work in the same way as us. It might just help their condition. They don't have a different, metabolism.
Yeah.
They don't have a different set of organs in their body. So obviously it works for them. It works well. And this is what I've noticed more and more is that people, on the podcast come on and they say, it's not just things like ADHD and it's not just things like epilepsy, but people have said there's numerous ways. Like there's Mark Davidson is a really interesting guy. I recommend you have him on actually. And he was saying that, he went keto because he saw his parents and he saw that they have metabolic health syndrome and things like strokes and heart attacks were quite high and type 2 diabetes. So he went for a keto diet and he never expected this, but his depression and mental health problems he'd been having were completely made better. And now he's gone years and years without medication. Now he never intended to do that. He wasn't doing it with the expectation that would happen. He just thought he'd try this for other reasons, and it's helped him in that as well. And I think the more that I hear these stories, the more it's encouraging that actually, yeah, it can help people and it can help all of us, because let's be honest, and this is what I talk about in the podcast a lot. This is probably, and I'm not qualified to say this, I think this is the case. This is probably the most suitable human diet there is. And evolutionary speaking, it seems to be that we would have had access to fat and protein. These are essential energy for the fat and essential building blocks of the protein. And we're in a society that is the other way around, and it seems to, want to cut its fat out, where it's got these modern fats, which are, industrial made.
Yeah.
And it seems to be cutting back on protein. And I find that incredible. And I feel like, that's where the damage is going to be, because I think the human body has evolved to eat this way.
Unfortunately, it's all the processed companies that are waving the big bucks around, and that's what gets promoted.
I think about my grandparents and my great-grandparents, how simpler their diets were, and how they never went to the doctors. They never seemed to be sick, and yet, now we've got a generation of eats so much fast food and rubbish, let's be honest. And that's why I'm saying, Dan, your children are going to benefit from your light bulb moment and your research and everything. Hi, Dan. There's another Dan here from
Hey,
Leeds.
Dan.
He's another friend of ours, or my friend, shall we say.
Your friend.
Nobody else is friends with Dan. How harsh is that, Dan?
Yeah, there's lots of Dans around, isn't there? Yeah, I've been known to flirt with a few Dans when we're on live and things like that,
I
That's
know.
my Welsh nature, But my children question the lifestyle now, if I'm honest, because I've got adult children and my son is teaching English in secondary school himself. And they're like, Mum, you always said our diet was healthy when you were bringing us up. And I said, well, that's what I thought was healthy at the time. Now I know differently. And I just think, you've got the heads up so much quicker. I wish I had this heads up 20 years ago. So like my children now, when they're at home with us, they have all keto and low carb, and they dip in and out of it now because they're making the choices. Or your Nan 92 with no health issues, Helen, that's fab. So so you're definitely up on the game for your children,
And that's interesting what you're saying there, Helen, because I think it is generational. I think that my grandparents the same, lived to a very old age, apart from one of them, but the others did, and that was their lifestyle. It was very normal, real food, and including carbohydrate. By the way, I'm not saying they were low carb, but they were certainly weren't eating processed food, and they weren't eating things like pasta either. They were eating potatoes and root.
It was potatoes and veg and meat, wasn't it?
Yeah, veg and meat, and occasionally bread, but not a huge amount. It's not like it is now. And even if you go to like McDonald's or something, the bread you're eating is not just bread, is it? It's got a lot of sugar put into it to make you want to eat more of it. So yeah, you're right. I think it's generational. That generation had a much more normal way of eating, and then we went through this weird phase. I remember my granddad, he's born in 1908. So, he had my dad when he was a lot older. And so this is probably where I got my love of history from, because I just remember like asking him questions about the First World War. He was only a young lad at the time, but he had all these stories. And I remember in these later years, he was forced by his home to go on like cereal in the morning. And he was like, why do I eat, as he called it, rabbit food for breakfast? He just didn't understand it. And I feel like it's a generation in the middle who got it wrong. And now I'm trying to hopefully raise my kids to be more aware of it. But what I would say on that point is that you're fighting against so much, because they come home from school and they tell you that, fat's unhealthy and we mustn't eat fat and we must eat like, pasta and potatoes, that's healthy. And I'm like, we're fighting that all the time. We get it. And you're like, oh, you don't want to set your kids up to have arguments at school, but you're like, trying to influence their food choices rather than just making them zealots about it. And then later you will educate them more and more.
Lee says about the healthy plate in school, he struggles teaching that to the kids now.
I refused to teach it. And luckily my manager at the time was also following low carb keto. And she agreed with me. She said, well, we don't, because we, being a college, we didn't have a curriculum that we had to follow. We didn't have to teach it. It was just something that we did. And so I said no. And in fact, when in cooking lessons and stuff, I was making them cook different low carb keto food. And one of the things that we would like to do as a company, and something that I'm going to lead on with KFC, is possibly go to colleges where they're doing their catering courses and everything like that, and teaching them more about keto and low carb, so they have an awareness. So you never know, in the future they may go out, become chefs, and do sort of low carb restaurants and cafes and stuff like that.
That's how it changes. I think, those conversations, sharing stories, that's exactly how it happens. And I think the other thing as well with kids, which is challenging, is that we don't reward our kids with sugar, but it happens elsewhere. And that's really hard because, I know that people do that from a point of love. They're not doing it to harm them, obviously. But it's like, can you not do that? Can you instead reward them in some other way? You don't have to give them sugar, and that's hard.
I think the cost of food, though, is to blame as well, because how cheap is a bag of pasta or a loaf of bread compared to sort of some of the alternatives that we use, and even to sort of the green veg and stuff that is low carb. That's really expensive compared to just being able to buy sort of processed stuff, and that's obviously a real issue.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, food prices are a very interesting thing because, politically, you can see there's a lot of instability right now, isn't there? And I think, if you look at the beginning of the pandemic, the same thing happened, right? I was going around Asda trying to get a few bits of shopping when do you remember everyone was going crazy buying toilet rolls at that time and pasta and all those things? And then I managed to get myself some lamb shoulders really cheap because nobody else was buying them. I was like, nice one. But, in times of like hardship, people fall back on those cheap foods because they're available and they think that's what they should eat. And, it's sad to think. I got quite annoyed, actually, annoyed not at those people, but on behalf of them, thinking they're being lied to because they're going to eat those foods, get more unhealthy. They're going to become more hungry from it as well. And they're going to have to eat more food. And then this cycle, aren't they, where their insulin is up, their hunger hormones are going crazy, and they get stuck in a cycle, and it's not their fault. And, so many people are victims of that. And I think that's a big injustice that we, hopefully one day we'll look back on. And if you choose to eat carbs because you want to eat them, obviously it's fine. But just informing people, like you just said there, Gemma, is so important that they know and they understand. If you start with, it's really interesting with arguments. If you start with a belief, if it's right or wrong, it will influence the rest of your decision making. So when I was a TA in a school before I became a teacher, I remember being in this health lesson about food, and they played the film Super Size Me, and they were saying, well, the McDonald's burgers are really bad because they've got fat in the burger meat, and they're really bad in the fries because they're fried in a deep fat fryer. They never mentioned sugar at all, and so they could say you became fat because you're eating all this fat, and that makes sense. I mean, it's wrong, but it sort of is logical, because if you start with that premise, then you can believe the rest of it. And so I think you don't want to restrict what people eat, but rather educate them, inform them, then they can make the right choices. And this is why I'm against the keto police as well, because it's not about being on the good side and the bad side when it comes to food choices. It's about educating people so they're empowered to make the right choice for them. And I think that's what you guys do.
We're really good at that here. I feel like we are with people and members. The support is about finding what works for them, and it's our individual journeys. And we all kind of, need to tweak it to work for us, basically, at the end of the day, because, some of us are more are able to eat more carbs than others, depending on where our carb sources come from. But you'll never find keto police at KFC at all. I've been known. Don't tell the boss now, right? He shouts at me, but maybe now and again I have 50 grams of pineapple to dot around on a pizza. I know it's
Mark,
bad.
you get that?
Yeah. Yeah, but once in a blue moon and 50
did you
grams.
say pineapple on a pizza?
Yeah, that's what's
That's the bit that I'm disturbed by. Oh my God. Pizza and pineapple never should go together ever. That's just ruined the pizza.
Well, why should have pineapple ice cream in the summer?
Oh my word.
Yeah.
But again, if that works for you, Trace, that works for you. And I think the honesty is really important because that's a part of this. Like Carrie Brown, I know very well in the States, who's part of the Two Keto Dudes podcast, and her and Cole were saying that when they're putting together Keto Fest, they hadn't had a Keto Fest, I think, since 2019 because of the pandemic. And so they felt that in that time, people had just been dropping away and hadn't been engaging so much in the groups and whatnot. And they said they think it's because people had a hard time, they'd had a stumble or whatever, they made some suboptimal choices for them. And then there was a sense of shame or embarrassment they couldn't. And I think that's really bad. We can't have that, I don't get it right all the time. I trip over and fall on my face sometimes quite spectacularly. But I don't pretend to not. I try to be me, and I try to say, look, I'm on this journey with you. I'm not trying to. I think if you've got a superior complex about keto, and there are people out there who are like that, they're not relatable. Like for me, I don't like superheroes. I think Superman's rubbish because he's not. I can never be Superman. What's the point? Was actually a person who falls over and steps up and tries the hardest. That's a real hero to me because it's like you're in the mess of being a human being and you're trying your hardest. You can't get more inspiring than that, I think.
And no
Can
one
I change subject a bit and talk about your cakes? Because oh my God, they are the best.
Oh, thank you. That's very sweet.
Yeah, no, they are really, really good. And in fact, I think I've got an order sitting in basket ready to go, and I just need to press it.
Lee was the same earlier. I said, I said, I'm talking to Dan. He said, are you going to be ordering some? And I said, yes, I need to order. I know.
Don't order it yet because I was going to give you a discount code, everyone, because you can.
Okay.
How do you spell Kutch?
Kutch.
Yeah.
Oh God.
It's CWTCH. Kutch.
Of course it is. Why have a vowel if you're Welsh, eh?
It's the Welsh word for a hug. We do it really well. We kutch.
Oh no, I know what it is. I'm going to make that as the actual discount code. So hang on a minute. Let me write that down.
I'm blessed.
Because I tell you what, I'll do it after this call. So I'll do it straight away after, so you can do it then. But I'll write the spelling down.
CWTCH.
There you go. Good.
So, what is your favourite flavour? What is your favourite or your favourite cake that you've made, or your chocolate? You obviously have chocolate.
Okay, the weird thing about the cakes is that today I was talking to the team about this, and I was like, I want to bring back the pumpkin spice brownie, and they're like, it didn't sell massively well last year, Dan, and it's nice, but I was like, but for me, I've got a ridiculous. It's a bit like being a parent. Well, obviously, it's very much like being a parent because you created it and you remember where you were when you created it. I feel really connected to all of them. Some of the later flavors I didn't actually invent because now I've got team members who do it as well for me, and I'm like, yeah, it's not as good as mine, but because you feel really connected to it. So for me, I'd say the Bakewell, the raspberry Bakewell. I invented that. I remember when we just moved out of my house and we were in the cafe. And I was like, I want to do a Bakewell tart. So let's do it. So I did that. Don't worry, Kathy. I'm actually working on a new coffee flavor. I actually made last week a white chocolate with coffee, real coffee, espresso coffee in it. And I'm going to make that into a cappuccino chocolate bar with a layer of white chocolate tomorrow and then a layer of this white chocolate with coffee underneath it. And then I'm going to also melt that down as the top layer on top of the cake and then make a coffee and walnut cake with white chocolate with coffee in it on top. Sorry, I'm getting excited by that. I love the creativity of this part of my
have you got any exciting things you can share with us coming up with new products with Christmas, or are you still in the
Dan asked on his page earlier on about sort of chocolate suggestions.
I like chocolate.
And I said Caramac or Dime, by the way.
Oh.
Yes, the Caramac I'm actually working on, because what you need to do, if you look at Caramac itself, it's not actually a chocolate bar, which I thought it was. I looked into it. The real Caramac is actually a sugar bar with vegetable oil. It's and flavoring. But I'm going to make a version of that where you actually toast the milk powder first. So you toast it off a little bit, make it a bit brown, and it caramelizes slightly. And I use cream powder too, so I'll do that to both. And then you grind that into it, and it should be more like a sort of Caramac caramelization. That's the idea. And then in terms of Christmas, I'm going to be working on the chocolate bars, which actually so the chocolate's going to become a separate thing. It's not going to be a DGF thing anymore. It's going to be called Hannah and Noah, after my children. And
that's sweet. That's lovely.
I thought, like, basically, this is what I've learned is that actually, if we say things are like, a keto product, the keto people like ourselves will find it. But actually, I want to have a sugar-free chocolate bar on the shelves for other children to eat as well, not just like people who know about keto. So this is part of the education thing. We were talking about this, Bessma and I, and we said, what would you call it? And we're like, well, name it after our kids, Hannah and Noah. So that's what we're doing. And
that's fab.
Yeah, and then the idea is we're going to get into shops eventually, and hopefully, and bring the price down, because as we get bigger machines, we can mass produce it a bit more than we are at the moment.
I think people don't realise all that goes into this, really, do they? And I've had my eyes open with now being part of the team with Mark, and with the bakery and stuff, how much work and costs and everything goes. I've really had my eyes open for the small business. I really do now. Want to support them as much as possible.
It's not easy, and I think a lot of us are used to buying food from the big manufacturers who've got huge machines churning it out, but like the chocolate is a complete pain in the backside, and tempering it is really hard. And when we temper like 30 bars at a time. Hello, is it stud muffin?
That's stud muffin, yes.
Why did I have to ask? I can tell he's studding it all up.
Sorry.
No, not at all. But with chocolate, we temper 30 bars. I do it all by hand, and probably about 10 to 12 of them have to be retempered. So it's a very slow process. And
it's a labour of love.
You what? Sorry, say again? Oh, labour of love. Oh, yeah, it certainly is. Yeah. And in terms of cake flavors, so we're working on some Christmas things at the moment, and we've got our award-winning
orange, please. That was gorgeous. The orange one.
Orange chocolate, do you mean, or orange cake?
Chocolate orange is still on there. The orange chocolate is on there. That's what I was going to order.
Today, so there should be some more coming. And also, I'm going to make a white chocolate with orange and probably star anise.
Mint chocolate.
Yeah, mint.
Yeah, so is it mint, do you say? Yeah, we can do that. We've done that, and we can do that again. And there'll be more things coming. I think it's just I tend to get a little bit too excited with the ideas sometimes, and then execute them all. So I need to focus myself on one or two things at a time.
Yeah. And when you're small, like yourselves and like us, there's only so much product you can carry, really, as well, isn't there?
Yeah.
To be honest, to make it, keep it, I don't know, exciting and alive without waste.
But what I would say with that, though,
cost.
Tracy, is that it's important to note there are different types of food businesses. So what people might not realize is there are some companies that come along and they set up a food company, and they actually have a concept, an idea, and marketing. They then go to a manufacturer and they say, can you make this food for us? And that, there is an argument for that. However, sometimes that means that then the food you get at the end of it is very much from a factory, and they can change some of the ingredients. That did happen to a bar, actually. It's a keto bar. And they changed some of the ingredients to save money because, this manufacturer was like, we could do it cheaper for you. And I think the difference is when you actually make it in a small business like, Keto Fitness Club and like we do, you have the flexibility to be able to bring out new products because it's people, I am actually making the flavors you're eating. They're not like a surprise to me because I've been working on them with the team. Mark, the same thing. I know he works in his bakery really hard to make sure the ingredients are what he'd feed his family. And that's the thing, isn't it? We're feeding our families this food because we know it's good for them.
Yeah.
Whereas these manufacturers come along and they go, keto, that's a real big craze, like the vegan craze. Let's jump on that bandwagon. And you look at the food and you go, well, this isn't really what anyone would feed their family. So why am I eating it? Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, us little companies, we're doing it as a labor of love, like you said, Sue. And we're doing it in a way that we know the standard is going to be exactly where it should be. Because, this is what we feed our families. And that's really important.
Mm-hmm. So out of curiosity, how did you and Mark come across each other then?
I think we're in a nightclub. He was at the bar.
That's not Mark.
No, obviously neither of us are that cool. Yeah, how did it happen? So it was. Oh, you asked me earlier on, how do I find guests for the podcast?
Yeah.
And I just found his YouTube channel, and it's really good. And I thought, this guy would be really interesting to get on the show. When he came on
YouTube, I'm better on the YouTube channel.
Well, I'm not saying he's perfect, and also I'm looking for more guests. So please, I'd be very interested in interviewing all three of you and people who are here today for sure, who are watching. I'd be very interested. Strip club, what? So I saw the channel. I just reached out, and he said he'd be up for it. We had a conversation, and Mark's a very genuine, nice guy, isn't he? He's lovely to spend time with, and also, he was very easy to make a podcast with because he had the microphone. He was set up. I mean, way better than I was, with different cameras. And then, of course, Ella's running the show. Really, we all know that, don't we? So she was able to direct him and set him all up on his way. And it was a really good podcast. And I think the thing about the podcast I like is that he was so honest about Lindsay, his wife who passed away. And I thought, that was really, some people, and I'm definitely not having to go at anyone here because it's very personal. Some people can keep things a bit on the surface level because that's more comfortable. How we all have a facade, right? And we all have the way that we are to the world, and the way we are to our friends is different to our colleagues, and the way we are to our families is different again. And I felt like Mark just opened up and took that facade away and was himself. And when you see that happen, when you're interviewing somebody, it's really special because then you think, oh, we've got a connection here. And it feels like, we're not making a show. We're just having a proper conversation, which is how I always want it to be. And I have no expectation of how it's going to go. I just want people to be as open as themselves as they can be.
And it's amazing you're saying that, because I was having a conversation last night and I was saying, I feel like being part of Keto Fitness Club, I'm my most authentic, real self. I feel like I can be a bit of everything. Whereas when I was an educator, I had to be the educator. When I was in church, I was the church warden. Whereas, in the house I'm parent. But here, I can actually be a little bit of everything and be myself, really be myself. What you see is what you get. So it's really nice to hear you say that.
The interesting thing about that is when you are more yourself like that is because you feel comfortable, and hopefully you feel like you're not too vulnerable, but you can be supported if you are vulnerable. And it's interesting. I think you then become more open to yourself, and you can be more honest with yourself. And that's exactly what I found with Mark, and that's what I hope happens on the podcast, that people actually are able to be. In fact, I think sometimes the keto celebrities are harder to get that because they're so used to doing podcasts. They almost turn up and they come with their pre-made presentation, and you think, oh, here we go. And I'm always trying to say, well, hang on a minute, let's just open that up a bit and get the personal side, because the personal is where we learn. I think it's where we can relate to people. It's I think we're such an interesting age, because 10 years ago keto wouldn't have been as successful, I think, in the UK, because we wouldn't have this technology. But the fact we can have this conversation now, and in different parts of the UK, or maybe even around the world, I think that's really exciting.
Yeah.
And we just watch, planting the seed, and we watching it grow, aren't we?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's 8:15, and I know your time is very precious to you this evening because you've got another job to do after you. Is there anything you wanted to ask us? Was it a burning desire of yours to know something?
Yeah,
You never
I suppose
know.
I'd like to say, as a membership, do you find that now that you're kind of post-pandemic, you want to do a lot more in-person stuff, or is the Zoom and the technology the best way forwards because it is the most convenient?
I think as a social person, I love Zooms, but I also love meeting in person. And I'm actually doing a members meetup in Cardiff over. Gemma did one last month. I'm doing a members meetup this month, and then Sue's got a members meetup in December. So we're trying to bridge the gap with both, if I'm honest with you. We'd love to meet as many members, and that's where Festival comes in, doesn't it? That platform. And I think, you joined us this time, and it was awesome to meet you in person. But the feel of being together, you can't beat that, can you? But we've made some strong friendships here in the Zooms over lockdown, and we've become friends. And, you know, with all our members, we definitely feel that family connection, you know, which is fab. But yes, a bridging the gap in it of having the best of it all, I think, you know.
I think one of the difficult things that we do find is during lockdown, during COVID, this was brilliant. We were all this was people's lives. We were doing so many Zooms. We had something going on every day, and we were able to do that. But our lives then get in the way when you come back. So we've all work. Some of us have two. Sue has 2 jobs. Tracy has millions of kids that looks after in a full-time job. I work full-time. So and Dan and Chris, they all work full-time. So it's really difficult to sort of actually get the time to do what we want to do, and we would love to meet sort of people and do it more face to face, but it is just,
it's a balancing act.
it's a
isn't
balance,
it, you know?
definitely.
You should come and join some of our Zooms occasionally. Sorry,
because,
Sue.
You know, you've got the cost factor now.
Yeah.
So yes, we all love face to face. You can't beat it. But when you say, "Oh, I'll do a meeting," everyone wants to go, "Oh, I'll come," and then you've got added costs on suddenly, and then some people feel, "Oh, I can't come because of the costs," you know. So,
and what you find is there's pockets like in Sue's area. There's quite a large member base up in your area, I'd say. So there's more people to meet up there. Whereas where my area in Wales, I haven't got a lot of members. So I tend to travel a bit more because I'm able to. But again, it's down to, you know, a lot of different factors, really, you know.
Saying all this though, Dan, I'm going to be in Cambridge in the next couple of weeks.
Oh, great.
On the weekend. So I'll pop in and see you for a cuppa, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
I'm only an hour down the road. It's not that far.
And by that point, I'll be standing in the local election, so you can do door knocking. I'll get you working with the leafleting as well. You can be out on the doorstep.
Right, yeah.
So, do you know what, Dan? Do you know I've just had an idea. How about in the new year, you join Sue and I on our live cooking on a Sunday afternoon? We do short and shorter for the members every other Sunday. Would you like to join us as a guest and do some cooking with us?
Well, as you asked me on the live, I have to say yes.
I'm suddenly busy every Sunday.
Yes, I'd love to do that.
No, get me out of it.
What I thought you were going to say, Tracy, I thought you were going to say in the new year we have a meet up in Cambridgeshire. So Dan,
well, I'd be up for that. Dan, we come and meet you in
far away
person.
from me, you know. Like I've met him and Ella. It's only about a 25-minute drive for the two of us to meet in the middle. So that's not far. Whereabouts are you, Gemma?
Colchester.
Can't you tell
okay. Well, I was going to say it's not far, but it is because the roads
are
terrible.
It's about 45 minutes, yeah.
If you ever find yourself in Cardiff.
Yeah, well, we've got family there, so I love Cardiff. Yeah,
I'm north of you.
Lincoln. Okay. Oh, Lincoln. Yeah. Okay.
I'd love you to come to one of my in-person meetings, Dan. You know.
I don't know if the stud muffin could handle it. You know, there might be some issues.
Dan, could you handle
it? I am such a lovely person, you know, and nice and caring and gentle. You know, I just get myself in trouble because I say the wrong things occasionally. But hey, yo, you've got to have a bit of a laugh.
Is it just me or is it getting awkward? I don't know what's going on.
Oh, Dan, this has been absolutely lovely. What's that saying now? She says that to all the Dans, don't they,
Don't worry,
Dan?
Dan.
Yeah.
Dan Flynn, I'm on it. I understand what's going on here.
Yeah. Deb is asking, is there a chance of a meetup in Northeast? I'm in Darlington. Who's near there?
Yeah,
do you know, Deb, organise one. We'll help you organise one. And then, you know, thank you. Helen says thank you for tonight, guys. It's been brilliant.
Cheers, Helen. Thanks for being here.
You know, so... But yes, so good luck. I know you've got a busy few weeks ahead now, but you're always busy, Dan, let's be honest, you know.
Yeah.
So
and I've got my sleep down to 5 hours, I'll be fine, you know.
Okay.
Just, I'm joking. Anyway, thank you so much. I really enjoyed that. It's lovely to meet you all again. And thanks everyone there. And yeah, Kutch is the discount code. So
how long are you going to give it to the members for? 24 hours?
17 minutes. So no. It's unlimited. You can have it for the rest of your life, no matter how long or short that might be. So CWTCH, yeah, that's the spelling.
Yeah.
I'll give you 20% off, and I'll go and do that now.
Wow.
Oh, do you know what? Bless you, Dan. That's so generous, so kind of you.
No problem at all. We'll help each other out. All right.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Thank
All
you
right.
so
Thank
much.
you so much.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.